So this is a quick review of the Kelty Highroads Shelter, which is sort of a one-size-fits-most tarp to attach to your vehicle. On the packaging, Kelty shows this on an SUV and on what must be either a mid or full-height van. But then right here in the middle, it says the peak height is vehicle dependent. And so the real question here is not just, is this a nice product, but is this going to be a good product in my specific application? Because my vehicle is not an SUV or a van. It is rather a 2025 Toyota Tacoma with a 6-foot bed, the off-road package, a factory lift, and stock tires. That sets the height of the bed rail at about 53.5 inches off the ground. There's also a soft trifold tonneau cover, which adds about an inch to that. So in this case, the vehicle height is relatively short, and there's a question of whether there will be standing room inside the shelter and how much usable floor space it will have. And this is not an unboxing video because the Highroads Shelter doesn't come in a box, it comes in a bag, and the bag itself is fairly nice. It's a side-loading duffel with a zipper. And this brings me to the first pro for the Highroads. The bag it comes in is spacious, and since it's a side loader, not an end fire type, it's fairly easy to get the whole thing back into the bag when you're ready to break camp. Out of the bag, the Highroads is a roughly hexagonal piece of fabric with 3 poles. 2 of these are long and have blunt ends. And instead of being inserted into grommets at the corners, these are actually placed into fabric sleeves. And you notice you can even do this one-handed, and it turns out to be quite an easy way to assemble the tent. I'm going to stop here for a second and add another pro. Kelty makes 2 similar products. This one is the Highroads, the more expensive version. It has aluminum poles, a fairly nice heavyweight fabric. All the stitching seems to be good. All the seams are sealed on the inside, and it comes with a fairly decent set of stakes. So overall, I think the materials are very nice, and the construction seems very good. And getting back to the assembly, here we've got the 2 primary poles in the pole sleeves, and then at this point you just pop the tent up and attach clips to the poles, just like any other tent. There's a 3rd pole that has to be inserted. This one is shorter and actually is inserted into grommets rather than sleeves. And this is the shelter ready to go with all the clips and hooks connected. At this point, it's an easy job just to lift the shelter up onto the back of the vehicle. For attaching the shelter to the vehicle, there are 2 sets of straps, a very long strap, which can go around the wheels or steps or part of the frame, whatever you have available, and a shorter strap that's used for roof racks or bed racks, things like that. The long strap actually lives in a little pocket to keep it out of the way until you need it. The short strap is just long enough that you can hook it up and over the pole sleeve. This keeps it out of the way and not flapping around if you're not using it. And this is the final setup. The shelter is positioned at the first fold in the tonneau cover. It's tied down to the wheels, and the one side is rolled up and fastened with a toggle. An obvious pro of the system is the adaptability. Right now I just have this tonneau cover, but in the future I might have a bed rack, a roof rack, a cap, something like that, and so this should be adaptable to whatever form my truck takes in the future. One thing I'm not doing in this video is fully staking everything out. Like I mentioned earlier, this does come with some fairly decent stakes. There's a stake loop at each of the rear corners and then a guy line on each of the main poles. And those guy lines also live in a small pocket so they stay out of the way unless you need them. And inside the shelter, I added a couple of adjustable tarp poles. These are not part of the Highroads package, and I've just temporarily lashed them in place. And they're holding part of the tonneau cover up. The reason behind this is twofold. First, it just opens up the space a little bit, and if it's raining, it should help keep any rain from running down the tonneau cover and into the tailgate area. Another pro for the Highroads, it is very easy to set up. It's as easy as any tent that I've ever used. Now, a problem with the Highroads, because it can accommodate a very tall vehicle, when you put it on a shorter vehicle, the sidewalls actually just are very long and drag on the ground. Now, this is inevitable, and Kelty deals with it by adding these long daisy chains to the lower edge of the sidewalls, and that gives you multiple places for tying these out, either as sort of a wing or as more of a vertical wall. And in my case, that daisy chain is just long enough to allow me to stake these side flaps down pretty close to the side of the truck. And this is my only significant problem with the Highroads. It is better suited for a taller vehicle. In my specific application, I can make it work, but I'm guessing that the extra fabric in those side flaps is going to be an issue in the wind. And a quick spin around the inside, plenty of room for a chair, and there is a window in the rear door, which I'll show in a moment. And a walk around the outside. Again, things are not completely staked down, so they look a little bit floppy. Large rear door, and one side extended, one side tied up. So another pro, the interior space is very livable, plenty of standing height. I'm 5'10", and I can walk around without stooping across about a 5 by 6 foot area. As you can see in the pictures, there's plenty of room for a chair, and there's a nice large rear door for entry and exit. Again, on the inside, with the tailgate up, there's not just room for a chair, but a chair and a cot. So this could be used as basically a tailgate tent. And a couple of creature comforts. Kelty put in a mesh pocket and actually a zippered pocket near the door. And there's a series of fabric loops on the ceiling. And finally, I'm adding both a pro and a con. On the plus side, I do like all the little design details that Kelty put in. Simple things like the Velcro keepers on the long straps. On the negative side, Kelty missed a couple of opportunities. For example, the loops in the ceiling are just loops. And I do have a tent where the ceiling loop is actually a piece of webbing with a buckle, which is much more adaptable. And my final verdict, I think the Kelty Highroads Shelter is a very nice product, and it looks like it's going to meet my needs now and in the future.